Hi, Dinah.
Hi, Heather.
It's good to see you.
Nice to be here.
For everyone watching, my name's Heather Jones. I work at JFCS, and Dinah Gilburd is a licensed clinical social worker and ongoing collaborator with JFCS, especially when it comes to coaching parents and caregivers about working with children. And right now we are at, I would say, a really crucial point in how we are acting and moving forward as parents. And I'm so glad that you're here to talk to us today. So I wanted to start out by saying, during the pandemic, the family, the household was a refuge and a haven in a way that we hadn't experienced um, that intensely I would guess to say, for quite some time for many families. But now we're at a transition point and things are starting to reopen and children are going back to school and going back to summer activities, starting to socialize with friends again. And Dinah, I'd love to just know, like, what's your advice to parents and to caregivers, grandparents, anybody who's helping their kids navigate through that reentry process?
Thanks, Heather. It's a great question because it's so timely and so relevant. And I just want to start by saying that every child is unique and different, and they may be experience feelings from joy and excitement to fear and worry. And so as parents and caregivers start to navigate the reentry process, I think what I like to think of it as transitioning into the next phase of the pandemic. And this is a transition period. And with every transition comes an adjustment. And so as parents and caregivers start to prepare their children, I like to think of a starting point as explaining both developmentally and what's age appropriate, using age appropriate language. What is going to happen? What does reentry look like? And in explaining this to children, what's really important for younger children is to use concrete language. And it may be something like, after you've explained it in very simple terms that they understand, to ask them to draw a picture, because most kids love to draw. Draw a picture of, what do you think the new summer activity or program or camp is going to look like, or visiting relatives, whatever it is that's upcoming. That's always a great place to start. And for older children, I like to ask them to draw two columns. And the one column is, what do you think is going to be the same? And that's if they have a frame of reference. And the other is, and what do you think will be different? And by doing that, you're going to get a sense from your children of what's going on with them, what they are feeling, their thoughts, their worries, their anxieties. And you want to be careful not to overwhelm children. And when I say you, I mean caregivers and parents, not to overwhelm them with too much information, but to pause and to listen and be attentive to their questions and whatever it is that's on their mind. And I think the other thing that's really important is to listen in a certain way to children, which is not to correct or critique or interpret or give advice or to change a feeling, but it's to validate a feeling. And by validating a child's feeling, it sends the message that you understand and that you're not dismissing or minimizing what it is that they're sharing with you. And I kind of like to end when I talk to parents and caregivers by saying that I think of the message going something like this: I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you.
I love that. And I love how you talk about it being what's different instead of, when we make columns, we sometimes do pros and cons and positives and negatives, right? But things will be different, and sometimes that's neither positive nor negative. It's just going to be different.
It's like, it's change, right? And so change, and with change, there's an awkwardness, there's a transition, and it's sometimes it's clumsy, right? But it's the idea that we are moving to another phase. And I think that's what's really important.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that the pandemic was certainly did have its negatives, right? And those are very clear and very personal and subjective to each person's experience. But there's also a lot of positive things that came out of it. Um, and so what are some of those experiences that you're hearing on your end, and how can we help nurture those experiences to continue even as we re-enter society?
Yeah, it really was a mixed bag, and continues to be a mixed bag. And I think for families who are fortunate to be able to spend time with each other, there were lots of positives that came out of it. And children and parents both shared with me some of the positives and what they hope to continue with as they move on to the next phase. And some of these quotes are touching, and some of them I'm going to quote directly, and some of them I'll just share using my own words. But I think a mom kind of said it so succinctly when she said, yes, time took on a whole new dimension. And we know that sometimes it was stifling, and other times it was so wonderful to connect with every member of my family. I really never had the opportunity to do that before, but being able to have the time to carpool, to put my child to bed, is something that I hope I can hold on to. And then there was an 8-year-old who shared, my family learned about gratitude. At dinner, we each went around and said what we appreciated that day. Even my little sister shared what made her happy. And then an 11-year-old boy shared with me, my family created weekly routines like game night and movie night, and we always had popcorn. And each of us got to share a game or a movie. It's been so much fun. And then a dad ended by saying, and I think this is really a precious comment, and I want to quote this. He said, my children learned about empathy and compassion and kindness, and I hope this will help them to become even more resilient in the years to come.
Wow, this is some really really sweet experiences. And I'll speak from my own experience. I have a teenage son, and we did institute a movie night, a movie jar, where you had to pick a movie out of the jar, and no arguing. We had to watch whatever came out of the jar, so there was no debate about it. And we've had a great time and gotten to share a lot of movies from my generation to ones that he wants to watch. And I hope that will continue.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, and then, finally, parents are at a point where this transition is happening, and we want to maintain a lot of the positive experiences, but we are also, it's important to acknowledge, a little burnt out. I mean, and that might be an understatement depending on anybody's individual experience. And you really emphasize the importance of self-care. And what are your tips, or what are your what's your advice for parents who are feeling exhausted juggling career and parenting, and perhaps caregiving for older generations as well, just being pulled in many directions? How can they preserve their own self-care?
Again, Heather, it's such a timely and relevant question, because a lot of parents have shared with me, I don't have time for self-care. It feels like a luxury. And what I say to them, really? Because let's think about this for a minute. Self-care is not just about you. This is also about every member of your family, as well as extended members of the family. Because if you are feeling depleted, if you are stressed out, if you are irritable, and by you, I mean caregivers and parents, right? Then you are not going to have very much to give to others. And especially during this time of the pandemic, and it's an ongoing pandemic, it is not over yet. right?
Right.
And I
Right.
think what's really important is that your children look to you for guidance and to provide them with security and safety and love. And one of the biggest lessons that children have learned from their parents and caregivers this year is, how do I manage stress during the pandemic? Because the mental health of children has been so critical during this period of time. And so parents are role models, caregivers are role models, and as children look to them for this guidance, if a parent or caregiver is feeling stressed out, that is exactly what the child is going to pick up on, because children pick up on facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. And even though you might say one thing out of your mouth, your presence and how you come across could totally wipe out anything else that you've said. And I also want to say a word about what happens when we go into stress response, because I think this is really important. Self-care is not just about, oh, great, I'm going to have feelings of calmness and I'm going to feel more relaxed. It has to do with the whole mind-body connection, and that when you are feeling stressed, your body goes into the fight, flight, freeze mode. And what that means is you are activating the stress response. Your blood pressure goes up, your rate of breathing goes up, your metabolism increases, your immune system is compromised, and then those feelings of peacefulness and calmness totally go away. So I was just reading an article, and the statistics have actually gone up. Visits to the medical doctor, 70 to 95% of them are stress related.
Wow.
And that's huge. That's huge. And so a really simple technique that I always teach, and in fact, I always love to start out my sessions with families and children doing this, is using your breath. Use your breath as a way to counteract the harmful effects of stress. And so how do we do this, Heather? Will you do it with me?
Sure.
Great. Okay. So the way we do it is we breathe in through our nose. Nice breath. And we breathe out either through our nose or our mouth, whichever is more comfortable. And we're going to do this 2 more times. We're going to breathe in and out. And 1 more time, in and out. And if you could do this only for a few moments, or if you have the luxury of an extended period of time, or when you're lying in bed at night, to just put yourself to sleep using your breath, right? It's a wonderful technique. And I want to add one more technique that again will elevate the mood. And what we're looking for is to bring on those feelings of joy and happiness. And again, counteracting the stress response is gratitude. And I think that being able to express gratitude, whether it's at a meal at dinner time, whether it's putting your child to sleep, to a younger child, I say, what makes you happy? Or what did you say thank you to about? To an older child, it's what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And starting this practice, doing it on a daily basis, if you do this yourself a couple of times a day, what is the good in my life right now? Not what is not happening, what is happening in my life? And again, research tells us that it works, it elevates your mood, it makes you happier. And who doesn't want that?
Our dinner table topic, we call it low high. So what was the low point of your day? What was the high point? And we try and end on the high. And but acknowledge the low, and it's important to get that out. But just it's a simple, easy way to just prompt more conversation than how was your day, and
Yeah.
it's a little bit more specific. So that's along the same lines, and it's worked well for us too.
Could I add 2 more things to that? Because when you
Sure.
said, I started to think about dinner time conversation and how do we include everybody? Because we know what happens when younger children aren't included in the conversation. So one of the things that I suggest is along the line of questions. What was the best part of your day? What was the hardest part of your day? And what are you looking forward to? And we know that children love those kinds of questions.
Yeah, yeah. Great advice. And I'm certainly going to take those tips to heart and use them with my own family. And I'm sure a lot of people watching will find a lot of value in that as well. So thank you so much, Dinah, and appreciate your time. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Heather. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.